Hi there, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and we're taking a look at this knife today. But before we get into that, if I get at least 50 comments in the next couple days, then I will answer the call. I've had a few people every now and then that keep asking me if I could do a video where I show all of the knives that I have. I guess they're assuming I've got a whole bunch of them, and I haven't really felt like showing off my knife collection because it really isn't, at least I feel like it isn't all that impressive. It's because I have to sell almost everything that I get. And so I'd like to have a much bigger collection. There have been times just when I've had this channel where I've had to sell off almost everything that I have because of, issues with, my pension. It didn't come in, and then there was a big time period where I had very little income, and so, things like that. For those of you who are wondering, I live on a disability pension, and the transition from not being able to work until my pension all got processed, it was a very hectic time because it got denied and denied and denied until I finally got to speak to a human being. It took about a year and a half. Then they finally saw me and met me. A human being in person I got to talk to, and of course I was approved. But that's the way the systems work. But that's a different story. I will show off the knives that I currently have if at least 50 people respond in the next couple of days. So that's 48 hours, 50 hours, whatever. 50 people in 50 hours, let's put it that way, from the time this goes live. Then we'll do that. But today we're taking a look at this. This is the DUNGAREE by Lord Field. I'd never had a Lord Field knife before. I decided, let's take a look at what they've got. It was in a battle box, and that tweaked my interest a little bit. I bought it, and I hadn't noticed what the steel type was. And then I found it on a few different websites saying this is 3CR, and then either they didn't say anything else. If this is 3CR steel, I'm really not interested at all. 3CR has a Rockwell 54, maybe 55, and that means it's very soft. That means it'll get dull quickly. Of course, it's super easy to sharpen in a hurry. Not that it's going to help you for very long. So I contacted Lord Field, emailed them, and they emailed me back and told me, no, it's 8CR13, which is a steel that I really don't mind. Now, it did come fairly dull. One of the worst sharpness ratings that I've had on knives. So I tested it a little bit. This is one of the few times where I sharpened the knife before I made this video. So I'll tell you about those little things going on. This is a liner lock knife. No pocket clip, no lanyard hole, so it works best dropped in a pocket or in a sleeve. And it's a pretty decent knife in some ways. If you're curious to learn more about this knife, stick around. The full review is coming right now. So here is the DUNGAREE folder in all its glory. As you noticed in the introduction, there's no pocket clip, there's no lanyard hole. This is a knife that goes into a sleeve. Last week, you may have seen the review for this knife. This is a Rough Rider knife also, but this one's got a lanyard hole, but no pocket clip or anything. So it's best to carry in a sleeve, and I should have shown this in that video. I still have to review these, but this is also by Smoky Mountain Knife Works. I think they actually have a Rough Rider brand on it as well. It's a leather sleeve, very simple pocket. It's not high grade at all, but this is also a good option for a knife like this. It fits in there. What you can do with this here is the same way you've got a wallet on a chain. You can put these sleeves on a chain as well and hook it to a belt loop or whatever. And that keeps your knife from getting into other stuff in your pocket. It helps keep it separate. So let's look at this knife for a little while. The handle is very well made. It's a good classic shape of a handle. The micarta actually seems a little slicker than a lot of micartas, but it's not bad. It's slightly rounded. It's not flat. The edges have a nice chamfer on it. Feels quite good. We've got standoffs. They're just simple, clean posts. It'd be nice if they had some decoration, but at least they're functional. The liners are stainless steel, and I found that these edges are a little bit crisp on here. I think when I take this knife apart, I'm going to take a file to them and just chamfer the inside edges a little bit on these, just so that those edges aren't quite that crisp. If you've got sharpening stones for sharpening knives, you can just run the edge of it on one of your coarsest stones as well if you don't have a file to do that kind of job. But overall, the handle is fairly comfortable. Button screws are inset, which I don't prefer, but it's just the way it is for most knives these days. The pivot screw, it's a fixed pin pivot screw. That's kind of nice. There is a very tiny defect just north of the pivot screw on the show side here. The little chunk is missing right there, and that's how it came to me. It's unfortunate. This screw, T8. These other screws are T6s. Let's see how well they, how much clearance they have, how much they wiggle. It's not an excellent knife. It's not an excellent screw. There's a fair bit of play there, but not so much that it's going to come apart. Where's my T6? Oh, I can use this T6, I guess. Let's check these out. Ooh, that's just a loose screw. That's not good. Okay, it's just a free spinning screw. Is it spinning all the way around? Yeah, it's spinning the whole thing around. But let's check the play in the screw on the other side here. The play isn't terrible. It's not good, but it's not terrible. I've not yet taken this knife apart, so I'll do that for the video. The play on this one's a little bit worse. Much like the other side. Well, for some reason, this one has less play than the other three. So, gonna have to be careful with these screws. Probably need to use, drive grip again. So I keep it handy. Let's talk about the blade now. You can see sticking out there, there's a nail nick, and it's a nice long nail nick, just like a rectangle that's been milled into there. I prefer this over other kinds. What I would have liked to have seen, though, is the same thing on this side. If they would have put the nail nick on both sides and maybe extended it a little bit further until, the blade starts dropping down here, that would have been even nicer. You'd have more to grab right here closer to the tip of the blade, but this isn't bad. I never failed to open the knife when I wanted to. So the blade shape here, it's a classic penknife shape. It's a little bit bigger, than the little blades on one of your, like the classic SD from Victorinox or anything, but it's that same blade shape. Sort of a spear point kind of shape, if you will. And like I said, it wasn't sharpened that well from the factory. This I sharpened using I used a very coarse stone to very quickly fix all the grind angles all the way along. And then I just used that, I think it was a 240 grit stone. It performed quite well after I sharpened it. I'll give you the specs on what the sharpening was from the factory and all that stuff later on. The sharpener's choil here, it's a little bit down the blade instead of being right at the plunge, but it's very close to the right spot, and it's a good size. I like the sharpener's choil fairly well. The only writing you're going to find on this knife is on this side right here. It says Lord Field, which is quite nice. I wouldn't mind if the other side would have had the name and if they would have written the steel type on the blade. I really like it when the blade's got the steel type written somewhere on it, and I prefer it when it's nice and small. So there's that. Now for the pivot. When I first got it, the pivot was quite loose and free. The blade would just come flying out when I would grab it. And I had blade play side to side. It was quite loose. After a while, it was just getting too loose, so I tightened it up. And now it's a little bit like a friction folder. That's how tight I made it. I've kept it so that, wherever you leave it, it's just going to stop right there and not move. So the blade's not going to fall out. When I did have the pivot loose enough, the detent is quite soft on this. And I think the detent ball is not proud on the liner here as much as it should be. So I don't know if... I just don't think I'll be able to fix it to give it a stronger detent. Because the liner, it's just flush with the blade right here, which means the detent ball is in as far as it goes. So it has a soft detent. That's another con. Now let's look at the lockup. Lockup's not bad. The lockup edge is on this liner here. It's this side as opposed to this side. So lockup point is very close to halfway across, maybe 55 or 60% of the way across. That's not terrible. It's not good, but it's not terrible. There's no up and down blade play, and right now there's no side-to-side blade play either. The jimping on the top of the liner lock release, it's made such that you don't have a cutaway here on the blade, on the handle, I should say, like you usually do. You just have that jimping sticking up, and it's very easy to close the knife, push that to the side, and then start closing the knife and get your hand out of the way. So I like that. You know, maybe they could have made it even a tiny bit smaller, but it's not a problem. It also adds a little bit extra grip when you're holding the knife to use it as well. So nothing terribly wrong with that. So that's the overall size and stuff and looks. How well did it perform? After I sharpened it, it performed fairly well. For an EDC knife, it's a decent knife. The tip is good enough to do some work, but it's not a it's certainly not a puncturing type of tip. And just that little bit of belly means that you're usually working with that straight section there. It's a good enough knife to put in your lunch kit if you need to. If you live in one of those jurisdictions where you can't have knives that you can flick open or with your thumb or with a flipper or anything that you need, supposed to have two-hand opening, this could be that knife. If the pivot's too loose though, then I could hold the knife handle and do a wrist flick like this, and the blade would come out. And if I was doing it standing up and had my arm to my side, I could do it so hard that the blade would open all the way. But that's not how this knife is supposed to work. So when it's tightened up so that it opens like a friction folder, then it performs as expected. It does a pretty good job. Now let's take some time to go over all the sizes, dimensions, and cover all of that stuff about this knife. The 8CR13, it usually has a Rockwell of around 58. It feels like it's probably, maybe it just wasn't heat treated all that well. Maybe it was 56, 57 on the Rockwell hardness, something like that. The weight of this knife, 77 grams. That's 2.7 ounces. The original factory edge had a sharpness of 310 bes. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up sharpening it up. And I sharpened it up till it got a score of about 140 on my tester. And then I started using it. Sizes, the cutting edge length, 69.3 millimeters, 2.73 inches. Blade length, tip to the closest spot on the handle, 78.2 millimeters, that's 3.08 inches. Why didn't they make it 2.95 inches? I don't know. It's just over 3 inches, which means there's another group of people that can't use this knife. And it's got enough limits already. It shouldn't have that limit as well. The thickness of the blade measured here at the Ricasso, 2.69 millimeters. That's 0.1055 of an inch. So not too much under 1/8 of an inch. The blade depth, it does get wider, getting close to the belly. So that's the widest point right here, 18.1 millimeters, 0.71 of an inch. The thickness behind the grind measured, about a third of the way down, 0.71 millimeters. 28 thousandths of an inch. I don't like that. I'd like a knife to be around 20. Oh, Bandit wants some attention. I've got to go play with him for a little while. I'll be right back. For you, it'll be just a second. Do you want to put your hand in the video? Oh, there you go. People can see your hair. See, you need your hair trimmed. It's really long. You got messy, ugly hair. Yeah, you do. Ah, yes. He's just begging me for his supper. It's 4:45, and he usually gets his supper at 5, so he can tell time pretty well. Okay, I'll let him go play out in the rest of the house. I let him out of the room, and he ran straight to his bowl. He thinks there might be food there. We were talking about how thick it is behind the grind. That's too thick. It should be 20. For EDC knives, 20 thou, that's about 0.5 millimeter. That's as thick as it needs to be. Kitchen knives, even thinner, but EDC knives, that's where it is. So I guess I really do have to take care of Bandit. I'll be back again in just a second. Yeah, he's just desperately waiting for my wife. She's at the hairdresser's. We've got another lockdown happening, and this is the last day that they're going to be open for the foreseeable future. So thankfully my wife had an appointment because she hadn't had her hair done in a long time. Back to the knife. Now for the grind angles. What are the grind angles from the factory? Measured this way, it started at 17.6, got about to 23.1 in the middle, and 23.3. So let's just call it 23 on this side. This side started at 26.1, got to 22.6, and here 27.4. So yeah, it was not sharpened well. So we'll call it 23 and 23. Although that makes it sound like it's quite good. Nah, it wasn't all that good. Wasn't sharpened that well. Now for the handle length, 101.6 millimeters. That's 4 inches, almost exactly 4 inches. The grip area, it's a tiny bit under 9.5 centimeters, a little bit under 3 3/4 inches. The thickness of the handle, it's 14 millimeters, which is 0.55 of an inch. But like I said, it is curved, and so that's just right down the middle that it's that thickness. The handle depth, it's widest right down here in the grip area, 23.1. That's 0.91 inches. And when the knife is closed, the widest point, again, it's down here, 27.8 millimeters. That's 1.09 inches. And what's the total length of the knife when the blade's deployed? 179.8 millimeters, which is 7.08 inches. So yeah, it's got some cons. It's got a few okays. Let's take it apart and see how it looks inside. Actually, I'm going to skip this section because, not the whole section. I'll skip the taking it apart part and show it to you once it's all the way done. Since that's spinning freely, I got to use my table vise to hold it and then use a screwdriver on either side. These are just white nylon washers. The screws, there's no Loctite or anything on those either. And no, this was not a D-shaped pivot pin. It didn't spin, but it certainly is technically capable of spinning freely. So there's that. And here, you'll have noticed, maybe on one of the close-up pictures I could show you, right there, there's gunk. You can see in this close-up picture, there's gunk in there. And that was that way when I got it. So it's probably some kind of wax or something that they used on the micarta or something that caused that. So, and then these things spin freely. So there's a number of cons on this thing. A little add-on that I added, before I finished editing the video, I did bend this spring to push a little bit harder across, and now the detent does hold it such that when I shake the knife, the blade does not come out anymore, so that's good. Blade centering is actually a tiny bit, well, it's about the same actually. I didn't talk about the blade centering before, but yeah, that's quite good. A little bit off to that side, this side here, not bad. And yes, I did chamfer that edge all the way around a little bit with a sharpening stone. So I made some small but decent improvements to this knife. So that's it. Thanks for watching my video. Thank you for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Those things really do genuinely make a difference. Have a good one. And remember, cut towards your chum, not your thumb. Bye-bye.